In this video, we're going to look at how to determine if your audio driver is reporting the audio interface's latency correctly to logic. So to figure this out, you need to first create a completely new project by selecting File New, and then choose Empty Project. And we'll select one mono audio track with the default settings. And next we'll open the audio preferences. And here we'll select the hardware we want to test in the input and output device menus. And I'm going to start with the tone port DI. Now we need to create a loopback by physically patching a cable from one of the device's analog outputs to an analog input. And on the tone port, I've cabled output 1 to input 1. And if your interface comes with its own mixer software, make sure you also route Logic's software output to the correct physical output on your interface. But on the tone port, which is a very basic interface, this is not necessary. So from here, there are two ways we could proceed. I think we'll start off with the simplest method, which was introduced in Logic 9. On our audio channel strip, let's insert the IO plugin, which is here under Utilities. And we'll be using this to route our signal out and back into Logic. And before we go any further, let's mute the audio channel strip in the inspector to avoid setting up a feedback loop that could damage our speakers. And in fact, to play it safe, I recommend keeping your speakers turned down or off throughout this entire test. Now let's take a look at the ping button at the bottom of the IO plugin. When this is pressed, a short audio pip is sent to the output specified up here in the output menu. So let's send the output to where we've cabled our loopback, at output 1. Now, when we press the ping button, we can see it metering here on the stereo output. Next, we need to select from the input menu the input that we've physically cabled the output of our audio interface to, which in our case is input 1. So now the IO plugin is set to send an audio pip out of output 1, where it will loop back through our physical cable to input 1, which the IO plugin is set to listen to. And what happens when we press ping is that the IO plugin times how long it takes the audio pip to travel this round trip path from Logic's output back to Logic's input. It then subtracts this number from the reported round trip latency and displays the difference here in the latency offset field, indicating either how late or how early our recorded tracks are being placed. So let's give it a try. I'll press the ping button, and after a moment, we get a latency offset reading of 22 samples, which tells us that Logic is placing our recorded tracks 22 samples late. So let's reset the latency offset field by option-clicking the slider and try it again. I'll press ping, and once again, we're late by 22 samples. To compensate for this then, we'll need to set a recording delay of minus 22 samples. Now you can try to do this with the recording delay slider, but as you can see, the resolution isn't really fine enough. So instead, we'll double-click the numeric field here, enter minus 22, and press return. And that's basically all there is to it. Now all our audio recordings will be placed correctly in the arrange page. And remember that the recording delay is a preference and not a setting, which means it only has to be set once and will affect all projects. So if you perform this test when you first set your system up, from then on, it'll be basically set and forget. Let's try a different buffer size now, say 128, and we'll remember to apply changes. And we'll reset the latency offset, hit ping, and again, we get a latency offset of 22 samples, which is what you'd expect, unless your particular driver is doing something different at different buffer sizes. Let's now see what happens if we switch to a higher sample rate. We'll go to Settings, Audio, and select a sample rate of, say, 48K. Now, to get a reliable reading after switching sample rate on the tone port at least, I find it necessary to also reset the driver by unchecking and rechecking the enable box in the audio preferences, and then hitting apply changes. And by pressing ping, we get a latency offset of 25 samples, which will enter as a recording delay of minus 25 samples. Now you should run this test at all buffer size and sample rate combinations that you normally work at, and keep the results of any variations in an easily accessible text file like this for easy reference when you need to change settings. So I'll see you in the next video, where I'll show you an alternative recording delay test that can be used with any version of Logic.